Welcome to the New Perspectives Theater Company podcast. My name is Federico Trigo, and I'm joined today by Artistic Director Melody Brooks, Resident Fight Director Ray Rodriguez, and later we'll be joined by Resident Production Designer Meganne George. And today we're talking about the history of New Perspectives Theater Company.
So we're celebrating our 25th anniversary on June 20th, and we actually will have 225 birthdays, because this year is the 25th anniversary of our founding in 1991, and we were formally incorporated as a not-for-profit theater company in June of 1992. So next year we can do it all over again.
Great. Mm-hmm. Two birthdays.
Two 25th, two silver anniversaries. And we grew up in a space on 8th Avenue and 46th Street. It was called the Pelican Studio Theater. We had nothing to do with naming it. That's just what it was called. And we sublet it for a couple of years. It was an incredible space. It was one of the best black box theaters in New York. And I've heard that from everybody. And many of the theater companies that are now prominent off-Broadway, or even some, on the verge of off-Broadway, used our space, got their start there, did their first production there, rehearsed a show there. So we really were both at the heart of the theater district and at the heart of the off-Broadway community way back then. And things have changed tremendously. We're still very much, not at the heart of, but I don't want to say an icon, although I sort of do want to say an icon of the off-Broadway theater community in New York City. And we were there for 15 years. And among the other notable things about the space was Geraldine Page taught acting. That's where she taught her acting classes. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I met her children in the first few years that we were there, because they came back and did a few shows. Tony Torn did Richard III with, and I'm going to utterly blank on his name, but the actor who is now in Game of Thrones. He plays Tyrion Lannister,
Dinklage.
The small person.
Peter
Dinklage. Peter Dinklage played Richard III. Yeah, it was. Who knew, right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And Angelica Page, now she was Angelica Torn back then, did Miss Julie. So we had to rent that space out to be able to afford to have it, and then we acquired a fantastic rehearsal space across the hall, and then they tore the building down in 2006. Wow. So after we had been there for 15 years and put up a 46-story luxury high-rise tower, and we were given the space that we're in now on 37th Street is a community space, so it's very affordable. Of course, it's nothing like the theater space that we had before. We have a studio here. And when we first moved here in May of 2006, so now it's our 10th year here in this space. Yeah, I never imagined that we'd be performing anything here. I really thought it would be rehearsals and maybe some workshops and things like that.
Or spend this much time here.
Yes, because we weren't originally supposed to. We thought we would have the space for 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years tops, easily.
And then move into a larger space?
No,
try to find another space.
Because this was supposed to have a gut rehab, and that when we were given it, and that's of course been delayed. Our landlord is a nonprofit development company that owns a gazillion buildings in Hell's Kitchen. Affordable housing, community spaces, supportive housing, that sort of thing. So it's just ended up that we got lucky enough to be here for 10 years.
Yeah. And how did you get into that arrangement with the...
Because it's my personal landlord. Oh. I've been living in Hell's Kitchen since 1979, so I guess I will date myself. When I came here for college, and it really was Hell's Kitchen back then. And we're still in Hell's Kitchen. I didn't realize this. I was in the Clinton Park on 53rd and 11th, which is where I live. And there's a sign up there about the history and how this used to be, because it's DeWitt Clinton Park, and how it gave its name to the area. But they defined it as also as Hell's Kitchen as going between 34th Street and 57th Street, from the river to 8th Avenue. Yeah. So I didn't think we were still in Hell's Kitchen, but indeed we very much are. So we've never left Hell's Kitchen. I've ever rarely left Hell's Kitchen in the however many years it is since 1979.
So who's the real daredevil of Hell's Kitchen?
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
It
is funny.
Theater company.
Yes, it is true. Yeah. It is true. So I, when that space was being torn down, because our landlord is involved in our local community board and the land use committee and all the development that goes on. We went to him and asked if they had anything, and this space had just been vacated by an after-school program, which is why we have all these wonderful, starfish and submarine drawings and things in our back patio, and it came with a patio, so how could we say no? But then when we went to rent a space to do just our small Voices from the Edge festival one year, 2007 I think it was, and discovered that we would pay $1,000 for 4 days in a space no bigger than ours. It was better equipped than ours. We didn't have any theater equipment in here at the time. So that's when we thought, well, maybe this wasn't such a bad place to perform in after all. And we've done, as you've been a part of, as one of our company members, not quite so long time, but a significant amount of time, 2009.
Yeah.
So doing sort of productions that have a suggested set or lights, or doing what we can with that, and our focus changed to a lot more developmental work, because in the old space we did big Shakespeare productions.
Wow. Yes,
a lot more classical plays. That's how Ray actually joined the company in 1999 for our production of Othello, which Austin Pendleton said was the best production of Othello he'd ever seen in his entire life.
Yes.
So
he loved.
He had seen them all.
He loved my Rodrigo.
Yeah.
I still remember him saying that to me afterwards. Yeah.
So, yes, we did a lot of great work at that space, and it was interesting when we lost the space, because it was a struggle to pay for it and to keep things going. And so there was a moment of, what do we do now? Do we keep going, or do we fold our tent and say, okay, we did that for 15 years? And I think if we had not been given this space, I don't know that I could have kept it going, because it is very, very, very hard to run an off-Broadway company.
Yeah, just the other companies that were in the building, how much hardship they had to try and procure space. And,
most of them are gone. They're not. They don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Creative Place is not running anymore.
Exactly.
Marsha Haufrecht, who was underneath us,
Really?
she's not having a company anymore. The crazy people on the second floor, I'm just blanking on what their names were.
Not Ensemble.
No, they were.
No, it was
the Weirdos. Theater Studio Ensemble?
Yeah, Theater Studio, yes.
I guess I shouldn't be saying, casting aspersions on a public...
the eccentric owners of the space.
Yeah. But it was very interesting.
We could start some beef.
Yeah, I really go to that area now, and when I do, it's just shocking. Everything's gone.
There's nothing. And
it was a serious community. I mean, we could leave our keys downstairs with the deli for people, like if there was a renter or something coming and they needed to be able to get in. We could leave the keys at the deli.
Yeah.
That's how neighborhoodly it was. We also still had prostitutes on the street corner. We were held up at gunpoint a couple of times in the space. This was really
in the space?
In our space, yeah.
That must have been before me.
It was. We were sharing the space when I first took it over with another group, and they were having a rehearsal. And the two guys came in with stockings over their head, and they thought that they were two of their actors making a joke, and they had guns, and they made everybody lie on the floor. They took all their wallets. Took
a bunch of actors' wallets. Wow.
Yes, I know. Yeah, right.
Burger King must have been really good that night.
They took their equity card.
Yeah, and we had a back door in the office, and if you didn't lock that door and you were in the theater space rehearsing, one time my wallet was stolen. Some guy followed me from the elevator. I went in the back door. I didn't lock it behind me. And a little while later, I went in to go in my purse and get my wallet, and it was gone. I was
in the theater. I remember that.
Yeah, and it was. I was like, wait a minute. And there we had a few. It was still a. Not a. It was. I wasn't going to say it was not a fun neighborhood, but of course it was a terribly fun neighborhood. Way more fun than it is now. I mean, the neighborhood is dead. Nothing stays open after 11.
But again, despite all of that. And really it was so rare that those things happened. Again, still had such the neighborhood feeling.
Yeah.
And everything across the street, too.
Right, the deli's across the street. McHale's was the bar on the corner just in our building on the ground floor. Total theater bar. It had been there forever. It's where all the stage hands would go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They didn't go
and
to-
there was several restaurants on Theater Row, Restaurant Row on 46th Street,
Yeah.
that are now no longer there. I mean, it's
Or even that
you
old
can't
hotel.
afford to go.
The
Yeah,
old hotel that was across the street that's now it became a parking lot, then it became
I don't know what it is now, yeah.
I have no idea what it is now.
So-
Right.
and so when we moved over here on 37th Street, there was nothing. I mean, we have gates all over our windows and doors, which I was just thinking it's time to open all the gates now.
I was just thinking that on the way
Yeah.
here.
because when I could sit at my desk when we first moved here and look all the way up 10th Avenue. And there's now a high rise right in front of us. There's
Yeah.
one on the opposite corner. There's a new building over here. I mean, we
Right,
are
yeah.
surrounded, and here we are. I mean, I've never
It's-
felt quite so
It's
tiny as I do here.
Well, I told you, I happened to be, a friend of mine was doing a performance for the French Festival, and a friend of hers lives in the building that's right there, and he's been there since it opened. And it's off the balcony, right up on the
Right there, the
seventh floor.
Seventh?
Up the 7th floor. And I looked over when I was there, and I just looked down at the theater and went, wow. It's like this tiny little place that
The
is
holdout, the last
that's-
holdout.
It's like
Yeah.
the last holdout, and everything that has just gotten so big, and still, because it's incredible to just stand up there and just see how much the entire area has changed, and yet there's new perspectives just sitting there.
Right.
And it's so interesting too because in regard to our mission and why we were founded in the first place and what it was that we were attempting to do, that's one of the reasons why we're still so tiny is because there is no money to support what it is that we do.
And for those who don't know what our mission statement is and what we're about, what is our mission?
So our official mission is that we are a company founded to use theater as an agent of positive social change, to develop new works for the stage with an emphasis on plays by women and writers of color, to produce classical plays with a look at how they have an impact, a continuing impact on our lives and work in the modern world, and to extend the benefits of theater to communities in need, especially young people. And so we had a three-pronged approach when we started, doing the development of new plays. Our inaugural season in 92-93 was 3 original plays. One was a lesbian fairy tale. One was a reverse ethnic sort of, it was called John Brown, but it was about a black cop who had killed a white criminal. Yeah. And then, so sort of looking at it from the other side. And the third play was called Behind the Curtain, which was written by an Iranian American woman and it's about an Iranian martyr, a woman in the late 19th century who was working for religious reform and women's rights in Iran in the 19th century. So we decided that we wanted to make a big splash, and what could we do differently? And we did them in rep. So our very first inaugural thing that we did was those 3 plays in rep in the fall of 1992. And when we were formally incorporated, we had auditions, and we wanted to have a standing company. That was the idea. And we had 30 people that we selected, and we had some of everybody: old, young, different ethnicities, some people with disabilities. And so we cast those 3 plays in rep from that group. And then in the spring, so what we thought we would do was original plays in the fall, and we'd do a classical play in the spring, and then maybe something else. We hadn't really quite figured that out. But we did Miss Julie in the spring of 93, and we changed the background of the characters to be Latino. So that in the original script, it is the valet's accent, that he speaks with an upper class accent that separates him from his fellow servants, and yet he is still a servant. And so looking at the issues of class, and it just happened to coincide with a big scandal at the time, which was Clinton had nominated, I think her name was Kimba Wood, to be on the Supreme Court, and it was discovered that she had a Mexican housekeeper who was in the country illegally. She was not paying Social Security for her right. This all came out.
I remember
and so this idea of the fact that we were doing a play that was 100 years old that was looking at the quality of life for the serving class, very much dealing with, and the upper class, whatever was going on with them, that it had never really gone away. And the idea that there were so many, in particular Mexican and South Americans, living in the United States here illegally, but being employed by very wealthy people, and they were treating them basically as slaves. Mm-hmm. So it was a really great production. So what we did was that had in the play, there's the two characters, and then there's a cook, and she has a few lines, and so we translated those lines into Spanish, and so that whenever she would talk to Jean, he would answer her in English, but at the end of the play, after the tragedy and Miss Julie's dead, when she comes and confronts him, he talks to her in Spanish. So it was really a good production. And we were just starting out, and we didn't, a lot of people didn't see it, but the person that designed the set and lights for us, Clifton Taylor was his name, and he was at the time the resident lighting designer for, I think it was the Philadelphia Opera Company. It was some company in Philadelphia. And he said, if you were doing this in Philadelphia, it would be the talk of the town. Yeah. And that's sort of like the story of our 25 years, is that the work that we do, and because it's also, the company was founded with a real focus on the craft of theater, doing the best quality work that we could do. We had weekly workshops for the acting company so that we could all develop an ensemble approach to the work. And then in '94 we did our first production of Macbeth, and we did Admissions, which was a new play that Austin Pendleton was directing. And so that's how we met Austin Pendleton, who's been a good friend to us for years. And that was named by Backstage as one of the 10 best plays of the year in '94. Wow. We also did I can't remember if it was in '94. We started our women's work project in '94, because one of the things that I realized in the first year when we did the 3 original plays in rep was that you can't put in, and then we did another full-length play, and it was a female playwright, but we already had a production date for it, which was September of '94, that you can't really put a date on a play that hasn't been written yet. And so we had to, we did end up doing that production, but it wasn't as good as it should have been. And so when we started the Women's Work Project, it was that we would take 1 or 2 writers in as residents and work on developing their scripts, give them assign them to a director dramaturg and develop that script, and then we could produce it. So the development would be much more proscribed, so that we would say, here's what you've got, here's what it needs, make these rewrites, make these changes, and we could do in-house readings and sort of build it up so that it would then be ready to be produced. And so that's why the mission of the Women's Work Project has always been to bring scripts to production quality, not to stage reading quality or any other thing, but to really do that fine-tuning in the development of the script, because so much of what happens, and then and now still, is that scripts are written in off Broadway and they get produced before they're really ready to be produced. And so what happens is that the directors and the playwrights are trying to fix it in the 4-week rehearsal process, although now Equity gives you 5 weeks for rehearsal, right? So you're trying to fix the play and direct it to be ready for an audience, and it's just a very, very hard thing to do. You can't really do that all at the same time. So, we did a lot over there. I mean, there's other things that I could mention, I don't know. Ray joined us in 1999, as we said, for Othello.
Right. My introduction was Macbeth previous.
But you weren't in it.
No, I know, but yeah. I saw it.
Oh, you saw it, yeah.
So it was,
and the other great thing about that space, because not only was it a great big black box theater, but we had height. And so we could really create sets that were multi-leveled, right?
18 feet?
I don't remember what it was.
It was
but we also had, and we had a lighting grid, and we had, and we had built-in platforms on either side of the space, so that for Macbeth, we really built, built the whole thing. And the other thing we could do there, which we did a lot for, is we did it for both classical plays as well as original plays, that we would include the audience in the set, right? So that in the audience, because it's another part of our mission, is that we never pretend the audience isn't there. Oftentimes that means direct address. Certainly with Shakespeare it does, but it can mean, you know, that when the audience comes in, if the set of the play is a living room, that the audience is actually sitting in the living room. That we built a set around them, so that it was an environmental experience. I mean, in a way, I mean, I think we were really, really ahead of our time, because people didn't quite know what to do with it, and certainly with our multiracial, colorblind casting 25 years ago. Yeah. I mean, I do remember our first Shakespeare production in '94 was The Two Gentlemen of Verona. And it was, I mean, we had everybody in there, and we didn't like match people up. So it wasn't like at the time, I think most what people had done was like if they were doing Romeo and Juliet, it would be like the Capulets would be black and the Montagues would be white. But we didn't matter, so we had a black duke and his daughter was white, and we reversed gendered some of the other roles. And so people that came to see it, it was interesting to me, their reaction. These were friends of mine and people I'd known, not necessarily theater people. They said at first they spent about 10 minutes trying to figure out what it meant. Like the fact that characters were of a certain color or ethnicity or gender, that there was some meaning behind it. Uh-huh. And then when they realized that that wasn't the case, and they could just let go of their preconceived ideas, that they could then just look at the people as people. That these actors were just those characters and they were just people. And that was truly the goal, and when we were very, very successful with it. Even now, I don't see a lot of companies that have the same percentage of diversity that we did, because we always insisted that that the cast, with large cast shows, at least 50% needed to be non-white. So no one, you know, we couldn't apply for funding as a woman theater company. We couldn't apply for it as a particular ethnic company, because we were really serving, you know, all of the voices that were going unheard by and large. And I think it's interesting to me that young artists today can't imagine that this wasn't always the case, right? Mm-hmm. That you see a lot more diversity in casting. You see it, even though there are constant complaints about it, right? You know, but the thing is that at least it's there. It's so much, right? And so the idea that it should be that way is the new thing, right? Because we were doing it, and gradually more people did it, but not, again, never to the degree that we still do. Mm.
I still don't think there are any theater companies out there, at least on the at this level, that are even still making that attempt. I think those who are making an attempt at it, the percentage is maybe 20 or 30% of, you know.
It might be. I think that there are. I think that in off Broadway, and certainly in the downtown theaters, that it is the norm now. Mm-hmm. That no one expects that they will have an all-white cast, right?
Right.
But it's still not the norm to have just a completely integrated mix of people doing it. I mean, one company that's doing it now, interestingly, is the Classical Theater of Harlem, and they started out as an all-black company doing classical plays with African American actors. So they have now begun to mix it up, and they really do have a great level of diversity in what they're doing. But their focus is, you know, legitimately an African American theater company. Mm-hmm. And but I'm still shocked when I get postcards or emails or flyers for things that are off Broadway and on Broadway. And it's an all-white cast, and the idea that because it's a classical play, or because I can't remember what the one was I just saw, and it's set somewhere, you know, but it's like a 19th century play, and the idea that you must have an all-white cast for that is just ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, it's
for a 19th century play. Wow.
It doesn't matter. I'm just saying, it's like most people don't have a problem doing multiracial or non-traditional, you know, with genders casting, if we're talking about a classical play, if we're talking about Shakespeare or the Greeks or whatever, right? Because people tend to look at those as just stories. Mm. And so you can people them however you want, with however you want to tell that story. But if we're talking about a play, like if it's a Shaw play, or maybe Shaw might even be, some people would be more adventurous with that. But if it's a play set in a particular time and place, then most people feel that you have to cast it accordingly. And that's the thing that I find most bizarre. And also the idea that there weren't people of color all over the world for thousands of years. That's part of our history that we're just not taught. And that is beginning to be put out there a little bit more, that there were plenty of black people in England in the 16th and 17th centuries. Were they the majority? No, but they existed and they were there. So it's so interesting to see how in some ways there's been tremendous progress in that area, but in other ways the thinking behind it, I think, is still very, very undeveloped, because you just still see it so much in particular kinds of plays that people think it has to be
limited
cast.
thinking.
Yeah, limited thinking about how to cast it.
And do you think that's an age issue? Maybe an older generation still wants to restrict themselves in that way?
No, I don't think it has. I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it has to do partly with commercial theater. That commercial producers, and there's a lot of young commercial producers, think it has to be that way. But I also think that it is. It goes to a much larger discussion of how we deal with race issues in this country. I hate to say race because there's no such thing as race. And we all know that, and it's been proven. We are all of one race. So we can talk about ethnicity But I was just having a conversation with one of our company members. I won't name her name. We had dinner the other night, and she is African American. And about the idea of a lot of the things that have been percolating that haven't percolated before, but the way in which white people, because we do have these discussions at New Perspectives about how white people behave and all that stuff. Her interpretation of what people meant when they said certain things, or the fact that there was an assumption that it's interesting, and see if I can describe this properly, that there is a feeling among some white people, certainly in the middle class, and I think we're seeing this in the Trump phenomenon to a ridiculously insane degree. But the idea that there is a level playing field now, that all those problems have been fixed. There's no discrimination because it's illegal to discriminate, and there's no thought given to the fact that many people of color, they're in schools that have no money, they're in neighborhoods, all of these things. If we look at the institutional racism, we look at the statistics on, that a black college graduate has an equal chance of getting a job as a white high school graduate, for certain kinds of positions, yes. Mm-hmm. And so...
and there's also the study that showed employers are more likely to reject someone if they have an ethnic sounding name.
Yes, right. Yes. Just from their resumes, right? Yeah. And so, it's a very, very deep thing about and again, our mission originally, but with the inclusion, and we also have this little catchphrase, which I have to thank my sister for because she came up with it when I was writing the mission statement. I knew we needed a button on the end of it, and it is: our aim is not to exclude, but to cast a wider net. Because if theater is in its nature supposed to be either reflecting back to a society from which it came or teaching us, it has to have all the voices. Because if all you ever have is a single voice, and for years it was white male playwrights, so even that was skewed in terms of how we think about things. But I think in terms of what people want to do with casting for particular plays, number one is people work with people they know. So it is the problem across the board. It's the problem for women's work, right? That for years, if you were a white male playwright and you were successful, you would continue to work at the same theater companies. And if you were developing a new play, there was the place that you always went to, whether it was La Jolla or wherever, that your play would be developed. And so for women to break into that meant that they had to take a real risk because they didn't know what they were getting. And it's the same with if you're going to start a new theater company, or even the companies that have been around, there are some off-Broadway companies that have been around as long as we have. They are higher than us in terms of their budget status because they do a little bit more, I think, conventional work. But many of those companies were founded with a group of people that either they came out of college together, or they went to an acting class together, or whatever. And so they stick with what they know, and it doesn't occur to them. I can't tell you how many times when we had our old space, I mean, I still hear it occasionally, but because we had so many theater companies working in our space, many of them doing a lot of Shakespeare and classical theater, and with all white casts, and I over and over again people would say, "Oh, I would love to work with some actors of color. I just don't know any." And it's like, well, or people would say,
part of the community?
Well, I know, but it shows you how segregated we still really are, right? Mm-hmm. And so, or the other thing would be that they would say that they would, in their audition notices, they would put then a kind of obligatory, all races, all people need apply, and that actors either wouldn't audition for them, or if they offered them the role, they wouldn't take it. Mm-hmm. And there's many reasons for that. One is that at that time, and I think it's still very much the case, if you have actors of color who are good actors and working for pay, there is no incentive for them to come and do your showcase unless it's a damn good role and they know there's going to be publicity and all of that behind it. Right. Also, there's a trust factor, and that is that you can't just one day decide, oh, we want to do multiracial casting, so come and play with us, come and work with us, right? We built it into our mission statement, so it's foundational, and we have lived up to that for 25 years. So actors of color coming here don't have to wonder if they are a token, right? Or don't have to wonder why they're being cast, or that they're not being cast in the obvious role. They're not playing the servant. A dear friend, Melissa Maxwell, who just had a terrible tragedy happen to her today, who is African American and graduated from, I'm going to blank on it, I think Boston University. And she talked about being there
can't remember.
In her senior year in the theater program there. And the young woman directing, who was white, was doing a production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And it had been like the third play in a row in which there was no particular roles written for black actors, and so the students complained. And this director, who decided that she would accommodate them, called them into audition for servants and wanted them to improvise picking cotton and singing spirituals. Yes.
Wow.
And this was in the late 80s, right? So so that was the idea behind it. And so what I'm saying is that so that it's not that people think the older generation thinks it has to be that way, but that it is people who want to go what they think is authentic, or why they think it has to be that way. I mean, it's the same problem I have with Broadway and all the revivals. I mean, if we're just going to recreate everything, I mean, think about what are classics now. They weren't classics then. They were the cutting edge of what theater practitioners were putting out into the world to engage in serious issues, right? And so if people think that to redo those plays, you just have to redo them the way they've been always done, then what's the point, really? So.
And how do you adapt it to the community today?
You don't even have to adapt it. Well, I mean, really. Look, one of the greatest examples of it was the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof that they recently did with the all-black cast, right? Now, they were able to get the rights from the estate to do the original script, which had a lot more cursing in it, right? Because when it was done on Broadway, they had to edit it. They had to cut the cursing out of it. And so I think they made the design for that show was not very good because you had no idea what year it was supposed to be, and somewhere buried in the playbill it said like 1980s. Because again, there you go. Even with a black production team, they couldn't envision setting it in the 50s and a black family owning it. They had to move it into the 80s. But it was so much more authentic, the language of the play, with African American voices, right? Because you think of Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman in their god-awful Southern accents in the movie, right? It's so inauthentic, and it was so grounded and so powerful, and it was the same play. I mean, it's not like it was adapted to make it be a play for a black family.
Well, it was adapted with the original script.
Well, that wasn't adapted. I'm just saying no, but it was. I'm not saying that it because of the cursing it fit better in the. It didn't matter. I'm just saying it was a better script. But just the language, worked so much better. So the idea that we have to sort of conform to what we think the time period was all about. Why? Because Tennessee Williams had a statement that he was making with that play, right? Which had nothing to do with class or anything else. It had solely to do with the character of Brick, right? And the questionable sexuality and Big Daddy and that, the sort of macho male influence and all of that. Do we need to see that play exactly with that point again today? I don't think so. But I think there's many other messages embedded in there, just like there is with any classical play, right? If it's a good play and it lasts, it means because it's got universal human truths and many, many things in which we can investigate. And so that's the thing I just don't understand why people feel the need to just replicate, what's been done before. I'm sure I'm going to get lots of... if anybody listens to our podcast, they're going to take it. But we've been accused of, not quite so much anymore, but I'll tell you, in our early days, and even until coming here, of reverse racism and male playwrights accusing us of, what's the word, discrimination against them. And my answer has always been, our choice to do this is about access. That there are plenty of places that a white male playwright who's actually also already been produced, because it came from the guys who had been produced elsewhere. They have access. There are millions of places where they can go and get their plays produced. But women and writers of color, not so much, right? That is actually changing for the writers of color, I think.
I'm surprised because I've performed in plays here by male playwrights. So
yes, I know, of course. But it's that sense of entitlement, right? Yeah. That we said they wanted to submit their play would be considered and be no. The stuff that you've seen here performed by male playwrights has been by our playwrights that we have a relationship with and that we, develop. And they've been few and far between, right? Two of them that you did, I think that's it in the last couple of years. Richard Wentz and Richard Vitterian, they're both named Richard, so there must be something in that. But
Raffi.
And what?
Raffi's plays.
Raffi,
sorry.
Yeah. Oh, right, I forgot you were in that.
Yeah.
So yes, but that's in the Voices from the Edge, the African-American playwrights, and that doesn't have a gender. They can be male or female if they're in Voices from the Edge. But, I just totally lost my train of thought. So it's your turn to talk, Ray.
How do I even follow that?
Well, how'd you get... We know that you came in with... you saw Macbeth, and then you jumped in with Othello. So what is this experience?
I actually was asked to come. It was just a situation of work. I would have been on earlier with that production of Macbeth. I'm trying to remember which year it was.
97.
97, right? Because I had just started.
We've done Macbeth a million times, and we'll do it again.
Yes, I was a part of one production.
Yeah.
So, needed a Banquo, as a matter of fact. It's not Banquo. Needed.
I don't remember.
Banquo? Yes, it was Banquo. Right. My good friend David Dean Hastings, who was playing.
He was our fight director. He was the very first fight director that we ever had in 1995 in our first production of Macbeth, and we really learned the value of having a fight director.
So anyway,
so he auditioned.
I wasn't able to do the that production of Macbeth, but I came and auditioned for Othello. Not for Othello. I auditioned for Rodrigo in Othello, and that was I believe that was December of '98.
Right, because we performed in the spring of '99.
Exactly. And actually that was for me. truthfully, it was the first time I actually, in my professional career, was actually doing a Shakespeare show here in the city. I had never done one before. By choice. Because most of the time, all the productions that I always went to go see either left me asleep, or I just went, why is this on stage? I don't, it's awful. So I was looking forward to the challenge of working with Melody, only because I was so intrigued with the way that Macbeth was actually done. And I believe you had already done Richard.
Yes, we had
with
in
Austin.
'97 with Austin. Yeah,
Right.
Richard
So
III.
I saw both those productions
Right.
and was blown away by the casting, by the production values. It was just, everything was just like, well, if I'm going to do Shakespeare, I want to do it here. and seriously, that's what it was. So I still remember I had such a great time starting that rehearsal process with Mel, and having the one-on-ones that we had, talking about Rodrigo and what my thoughts were regarding his character and so on, and some of the fun stuff that production. And it's funny because people who I either haven't seen before, or people who I've met that have actually seen that production can still remember some of the things that I apparently had done for that show.
That's a great
So, yeah, and we actually did manage to make Othello a multiracial cast, believe it or not. We said it. We made it a modern setting so that it was in the modern military, and so we were able to add in the generals in the beginning, and Bianca and the clown. So we were really able to do that. But I have to really give credit when you talk about, I'd forgotten about the individual sessions, that Amanda Maud, who is our associate artistic director when she's in town, she lives in London. But we did a string of shows together when she was still here in New York, and really, I have to credit her with which being our verse nurse. But that was, and so when we would really learning the working with the first folio, and a lot of the elements of working with the verse that are at the time were sort of old hat in England, but in New York all anybody knew was iambic pentameter. Right. They knew nothing else, and so we were really able to. I think that was probably one of the best, not just best productions, but also best rehearsal period and cast, because we had it cast that could come to every rehearsal. We didn't have to scramble to squeeze people here and there. We had Amanda; she played Amelia brilliantly, and but also that we were able to do this verse work with everybody, the text work, and then put it on its feet. And fantastic fight direction by David Hastings, who played Cassius. And it was really quite a crew. And the same, almost not the same, but many of the same people they'd been in Macbeth, in the 97 Macbeth. And then the following year we did Julius Caesar. And David played Mark Antony in that one. That was a much more difficult production. Really interesting how these things work out. It was still a very good production. We lucked out with the guy who was designing it, who was also doing a McDonald's or a Burger King commercial at the time. So he kind of padded his budget for them. And we
Do we want to admit that?
Yeah. Well, we're not saying who. We're not naming names.
Well, I'm sure they could say.
So we set it in the 50s, the whole Murder Inc. period. It's another thing that's a hallmark of the work that we do. And we do it in classical plays, and we do it in I guess in plays that we're developing, it's considered part of the dramaturgy, right? Which is, what is this world? And again, the idea that if we're going to look at a classical play and say, what does it have to say to us today? That one of the things I always thought about, the whole Julius Caesar issue in the historical setting was that Caesar had a child with Cleopatra. So he had no heir. Octavian was his wife's nephew. And so for him to come back to Rome, and he brought Cleopatra to Rome with him, and so suddenly this idea that, that kid might be on the throne, and the issues in the play of Brutus contemplating, oh, could we just kill Caesar and then we'll have our republic and things will be fine. So the idea that whenever you use violence to achieve a political end, you will only get violence as a result of that, right? And so it made me look for a time period where we could explore that, and I looked at Murder Inc. In the 50s with the mafia, that there was a fringe element within the mafia that was just murdering everybody. It was their preferred answer for everything, and it got so bad, and the mafia controlled the port, right? And with the longshoremen, and that business left New York, in droves, and went to LA and to Norfolk. And the port of New York has never recovered. Wow. Yeah. The money never recovered, the business. And so we set it in the 50s and did a whole little a prologue, like tableau thing, over the fight with Pompey and then Cleopatra, and leading up to the beginning of the play. And it was set in a warehouse, and so that was the beauty of this person having an extra budget to create the warehouse effect, and that we sat the audience like in almost like a boxing ring around it and let it all happen there. So it was still really a great production, but it was a little more difficult to achieve. And that's, I really miss, we haven't done a big Shakespeare production in a long time where we could have real elements, real set, and really have a team. I've been hankering for that for a while. So
speaking of set and elements,
yes,
we were just joined with Meganne. And Meganne, can you
I can't talk about that show.
No, you can't.
But can you introduce yourself and what you do here?
I'm Meganne George, and I am the resident designer, and I do costume and set design,
projection design, graphic design, slide
design.
Whatever these. She's our Uber designer.
That's a great title.
Yeah.
Designer. Yeah.
She's our design czar.
A lot of pressure.
Do you put that on resumes?
Yeah. And Meganne, the first show you did with us was in 2000, so we were just up to 99 with Othello. Mm-hmm. And
we're going back.
Yeah, we're going back. We're going back. We went way back to the
beginning.
beginning.
The first show I did was
Good People.
Good People.
In 2000, the spring of 2000.
Well, I thought that was, wow. Was it 2000? I thought it was 2001.
No, it was 2000. We could go look on the wall in our gallery of shows. I'm pretty sure it was 2000.
Yeah, it was 2000.
Yeah, and Meganne had been recommended. Oh, she came with the director.
Yeah, through John Stieber.
Yeah, and that was in Voices from the Edge, and a new play by L. Trey Wilson.
And
Melissa Maxwell, whom we just mentioned earlier, that was her first production with us.
Yes, and it was a 4-person show, and taking place in more about different perspectives of the same event, and sort of to go along with that, we took the space and we turned it. We kept turning it to get with each character's perspective, rather than, and so it took place in a few different locations, but every location was sort of on stage represented by the iconic thing of that location.
Right.
Like the living room had a little very modernish couch arrangement, and there was a table, not unlike the one we're sitting at, but this is not the one, that was used for a desk and a dining table. And then the hardest thing about it, even with all this revolving, changing the location of the set, that was actually pretty easy. The actors were game, and it fit very well within the context of the story. So they could do it without it seeming just about moving scenery, which sometimes when you keep moving stuff, it does sort of seem like it's just about moving scenery, and that's always a danger.
But I think because there were only 4 people, it only had to be moved 4 times.
Yes.
Right? So it wasn't like it was constantly shifting. So we got a whole chunk that was one person's point of view, and then it would shift, and then there would be another whole chunk. Are you going to talk about the bed?
I was going to talk about the bed. The hardest
Tell
part.
me about the bed. What?
The hardest
we
part.
had some really genius beds, too, because the bed in Othello was also genius as well.
The hardest part about that show was, in fact, the bed. I had made, it was in the old space, which had which no space has anymore. But that space had lovely giant
Yeah,
ceilings.
we were
Which you guys
talking
should probably
about
talk
that
about
earlier,
because
yes.
you could
Yeah.
do real fights in
That's
there
right.
as well.
Exactly.
But we made I made Roman blinds, oversized Roman blinds, which that is the fabric ones that have battens in them that fold up on themselves.
Oh.
So they were 16-foot tall, oversized Roman blinds, and they pulled up, and behind them was a bed on a wall. So that Melissa, who had the scene in the bed, was actually standing up so that you could see the bed and see the whole scene rather than it being on the ground, which in a black box space, unless you have the proper rise on the risers, no one can ever see that sort of stuff on a bed, and you lose so much. And because of this, we could see everything in that bed, and it was crucial because it was actually the pivotal
Right.
scene in the show. If it hadn't been so important,
It was also stunningly beautiful. I mean, visually, stunning.
sounds
It really
beautiful.
worked. And yes, when Meganne came and worked on that show and introduced us to the joys of IKEA as for sets. And the other great thing about that space was that because we had great storage in there, we could reuse things over and over and over again. Now, I think you took a bunch of that for Jeff's photography studio.
Yeah.
But whatever was left was recycled and reused 100 times. I mean, our average set cost, not counting good people because Meganne brought in, a new infusion, was between $300 and $500 because we had so much stuff that we could, already use. And so after Meganne did that, was the next thing Ted Lange's play? No,
I think I
No.
did. I did some.
Oh yeah, you did the Taming of the Shrew, which won the
Yeah,
Uber
no.
Award,
Yeah, which is my first time meeting Meganne.
Yeah.
Shrew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which was another brilliant production, but difficult because they started rehearsal 2 days before 9/11.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
and I
was-
wasn't
that was
directing
rough.
that. Someone else was directing it, and her name was Miriam Eusebio, and she and I had gone and done a school workshop out in Long Island for sixth graders, and they were studying the Taming of the Shrew. And so one of the things that was really interesting was that they were not using the induction scenes at all, which establishes the Christopher Sly story. They were just starting as if the story of Kate and Petruchio is the story. And so this whole issue of the way Petruchio treats Kate and all of that. So in the workshops that we were doing, we asked these kids about what they felt about, this was 2001, right? Or we had done the workshop in 2000. Gender roles, like how did they think that men should, be the breadwinners and all of that? And it was shocking to us that these little sixth graders in 2001 could have given us, they were giving us the same answers that you would have gotten from kids in the 40s or 50s, right? So Miriam and I then went back and did research on the whole induction, the opening scenes, and found that there was a contemporaneous script, The Taming of a Shrew, that actually has an ending to that framework. And so I was the dramaturg on it, and we put it together, and we set it in ostensibly the 30s or the 20s or 30s, vaudeville, burlesque sort of, and got a fantastic cast again. And there was a lot of improvisational work that needed to be done because we were actually asking the actors to create their own Lotzies, right? We gave them a training in vaudeville, burlesque, and what a Lotzie was, and 2 days after the rehearsal, 9/11.
9/11 happened. Well, I mean, playing Petruchio on that at one of the, and I was, I knew we were going to get to it, but one of the amazing things about that, which I still talk about when I talk about acting work, it was creating the whole persona of an actor who was in a vaudevillian troupe.
Right.
So Petruchio was the character I was playing, but with the Christopher Sly story, my character's name was Dick Muldrew.
Yeah.
And it created a whole history with him. And it was very funny because all of the other characters had their characters, and we all had the histories as the traveling troupe. And that filtered into the entire Kate and Petruchio story as went along. So it was really...
We postponed the production dates. We really
Yeah.
had to because it was impossible for the cast to come together and be
Yeah.
funny, right? Right after 9/11. But we persevered. We were supposed to, I think, open in early October, and we ended up
Right.
doing it in November.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fantastic. And then Meganne came along, and that was one of the instances where I was saying that we never pretend the audience isn't there, and it's direct address sometimes, but also it's where we put the audience. And so building a hall in a mansion where the audience was seated. Some were in chairs lined up, but some weren't. Some in like armchairs and things that were spread around the. It was
well, we put Christopher Sly in the audience on a chaise. So in the audience was his sort of dais, as it were, and so to sort of, I believe, to sort of blend into the more regular people,
to the populace.
not that people that were plants, but the audience. I think we sort of did a few people, and then there were also benches along the walls, that were upholstered rather than just
hard benches,
metal chairs.
Right. Yeah. I forgot about the benches. Yeah. I knew we had them along the walls, sort of as if they were in the room.
But one of the favorite things for me about that show, and I think what got me a job, a very good job later on, was the fight between Kate and Bianca, because I decided that I had to take their personas that they were creating
as the actors,
as the troupe of players, and take that into consideration as I was designing what the characters would wear in the play, because it was all coming out of the trunk, or we did a lot of all this. The sound for that show was all improvised by the actors as well, with slide whistles and coconuts and
everything.
All that sort of stuff. And
actually, Deanna has found the video too. Yeah, we have to find it. We have to get it.
Oh, no.
So we were talking about how we do
Ray has a look of just
I do.
joy on his face right now.
We were talking how you do the Kate and Bianca fight scene, and I decided that stealing from Sondheim, and every stripper has to have a gimmick, that Bianca was the balloon girl who pops her balloons, and the fight scene was Kate. She was about to go. Bianca was about to go on stage, but the fight scene became Kate popping her balloons.
Wow. There was a lot of fun doing fight direction for that show. It really was.
There was a lot of bustiers and a lot of beards. We also did, because we established the troupe of players, and then people played multiple roles. So, there
was a scene where Deanna...
Deanna played... Annemieka played, but it was also, so their bass character... Deanna played. She was she had like butterfly wings, and she was sort of like the ballet dancer, and she ended up playing the father and something else too, right? Batista, and I think she played something else. And Annemieka Farrow played.
Not Hortensio.
Hortensio,
yes.
But also the widow at the end or something.
That's the widow.
And the pedant. Right. And so there was a scene where one of them, or maybe it was Monica Asensio.
Bianca.
Where she was being Bianca, and then she also had to be the pedant. And so she would say her lines over, and then she'd put the beard on and say another line over there. So it was truly magnificent. I mean, out of that great tragedy came this really incredible production.
It really was.
And that's also the kind of thing, too, that, one of the reasons why Meganne is our resident designer today, is that the idea that it is really a team from top to bottom. And so working with the actors for them to develop their characters and to develop the bits. I mean, it was like we'd asked them to speak Greek when they first came in. They really didn't have a way into creating the Lattes, but we found it. But that also that for whatever characters they came up with, that had not Meganne came up with the balloon idea, then that whole fight thing, I mean, it made it a whole burlesque sort of striptease thing. And we did Kate's final monologue as a fan dance. At the end, so
continue with the burlesque.
It was a total. It was really great. So that was in 2001.
November 2001.
And then we did Macbeth in the spring of 2002, and that was the first time we had done it. We did it. There was a church on West 4th Street in Washington Square, Methodist Church, which was lovely, but it was very old and falling apart. And we then did Romeo and Juliet there the next year, and that's now condominiums. So you want to talk about what's happening with space in this city. They could not raise the money to do the structural renovation that needed to be done. It was unsafe at the time. But what I liked, because it was a Methodist church, it was very plain. So it was all wooden. There was a cross on the altar, but there wasn't a whole lot of followed all around. And so it was just fantastic. And we did 2 shows there. And then now it's condominiums. So, and it was great that we could do it there because we then did them for schools. So we had a matinee for school audiences, and we could see 100 kids, and there were 150 kids. And we staged it where the actors moved everywhere. They went around the back of the audience. And actually the review for, I think it was for Romeo and Juliet, said if it seems like the actors are everywhere, that's because they are. It was like,
that was Macbeth, actually.
Oh, was it?
That
Okay.
was Macbeth,
Yeah, all
I
right.
still remember that. Yeah.
And so, and that was our budget speed. We could afford that. And now thinking about, I would love to be able to do something in the Armory, for instance, but the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, that would cost have just always been beyond our reach. And so that was so you continue to do, you weren't quite our resident designer then.
No,
because you went away and came back.
I
Yeah.
went on tour.
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
I went.
Why did you leave us?
Yeah.
Why did I leave you? Because
She
of
gave
a
us some,
reference that
she
Melody
gave us
gave
some good
me.
recommendations for people while she
Of
was
a reference that Melody gave me. Yes, workshop theater does actually get you work. I wound up with a job doing Mapping Mind's Dollhouse, which was on tour for 10. I was touring around the world with it internationally on and off for 10 years. So, and then culminating in filming it for French and German television, and theatrical, a very limited theatrical release in France, and then French and German and European television, and here it's been available on DVD with a few run little short.
Was Peter Dinklage in that too? Because we were just talking about him during Richard III years ago.
He was originally cast as Torvald, and then station agent hit just as we were supposed to open at St. Anne's warehouse, and he kept calling us at rehearsal. They've sent me to Italy to do press. I will be there. I will be at rehearsal next week. They're sending me to such and so to do press. I will be at rehearsal next week. They're sending me, and eventually next week and next week and next week wound up being a week before we open.
Wow.
So at that point in time, Mark Povinelli, who was playing Dr. Torvald, who Mark is at this point, I would not quite Peter Dinklage, but very close. He's got a new series on Netflix or one of those shows. The one with he plays the cat, and there's a bunch of bad guys, and he plays a guy in a cat mask. I've seen people talking about it. I have not seen it. But anyway, so Mark Povinelli took over. So no, Mark was not in it, but Peter was originally
Peter
in
was
it.
not in it, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Peter was not in it. But I got the part because of a show that you all had done.
Yes, and I can't even remember what that was now. It was a show that was being done in our space, and all I remember, it was Lisa Harris. It was, the set was literally piles of newspaper everywhere. It was a hoarder situation. And did you design that too?
No, that was before me.
So I can't remember even how we did that, but I just remember stacking boxes and then like covering them on the outside. It was literally our Black Box Theater looked like a garbage dump for the length of that production. And when that was over, at some point later, Lisa asked if I could recommend a good costume designer at the time. So you just did costumes for...
I just did costumes for them.
So, way back when designers were like one thing, and certainly women designers, female designers, it was okay if you were a costume designer. We've just had this, I'm a member of the League of Professional Theater Women, and Meganne is now too, finally.
Yes, finally.
But this whole issue about parity for women theater artists and especially for writers, directors, and designers, and this whole discussion about directors who think there's not, who know a lot of female costume designers, but they literally say, well, I don't know any female set designers, or they don't think women design sets. And there are a few female lighting designers that are known that design on Broadway, but but now, certainly at the off-Broadway, and I think to some extent the off-Broadway level as well, depending upon what kind of space, that you have, we call Meganne our production designer, because she often will design both the set and the costumes, or she's doing the set and the props and the, if we're having projections, because it's an aesthetic, it's a dramatic metaphor that the design is as important as anything else, and that it is part of the message, it's part of the statement we want to make as a theater company with a particular production that we're doing. And so, and it's like, it goes beyond just designing a particular show. Meganne she's making the birthday cake for our 25th birthday party on June 20th. Everyone should come and try it. There's no cover charge. The information is available on our website. But also gathering materials. We don't have nearly the storage that we used to have. But finding things, if Meganne is out doing it, or she does another show and somebody's throwing things away, and we can make use of it. And we also did when did we start? Meganne and I actually helped create a high school in East New York, a public school, called the School for Classics. I think it was 2009 maybe. We did 4 years there. And created an integrated theater curriculum for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And I have never done anything harder in my life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you can't hear my head.
Yeah,
So
Meganne is
right,
nodding her head.
But Meganne got a ton of stuff from the Bronx Opera, where she also works. Got these huge, big, lovely arches donated to the school, and we did manage to get a lot. So it's an ongoing thing. It doesn't ever, your head's never 100% free of new perspectives, is it?
No, but
which is the way I like it. I'm not sure how she feels about it, but
then I can also call them borrow stuff. So
yes, that's true.
When I needed a nasty old fur coat for Grace Scott, and I was like, "Do we have a nasty old fur coat?"
Yeah.
And you said, "Oh, actually, yes, we do."
And it was great.
So that all works out, and it actually is. It's kind of nice to be able to. Because what we used to do with theater is just throw it away at the end. So if you work with different companies and you know who can, like our rehearsal cubes that we get, that we use so often now in our little space for readings or small workshop shows, those were from the Bronx Opera because they were just going to throw them away.
And actually, the World Financial Center just used those too. Elisa called and borrowed them for a couple of days.
Yeah, they were.
So our stuff goes to the heights and to the depths. East New York, the World Financial Center.
It's good to be able to recycle stuff now too. Although I do remember when I was in graduate school and the director asked us to build her set out of an entirely green thing, and we laughed at her. Because there was no way to do it. Was a completely strange concept that you would even try to do a set out of something completely green at that point in time, because we were still using styrofoam and so much stuff like that to create rocks or trees or whatever. We still do. Now, however, there has been a movement to be more conscientious of all of that stuff. And the off-Broadway community is very good about, well, I have those stairs, so you don't need those stairs. Don't build more stairs. Or, Melody, I need a set of 5 stairs. Find me 5 stairs. And she'll type it up on the off-Broadway dish, and then we'll be going to pick up staircases somewhere.
Right.
So, we try to do what we can environmentally, too. And it makes it easier.
Yeah, it makes it easier and cheaper in the long run.
And nobody has the storage that they used to have.
Right. We actually now have an actual storage space out in Queens.
And all the scene shops have moved out of the city. And
yeah, that's true. All the lighting rental places are out of the city now too, as well.
Right.
Yes, because no one can afford to pay for the real estate. You can't actually have your lighting store in Manhattan anymore, right?
That's a reoccurring theme of our
even the warehouses, right, on 11th and 12th Avenue, where some of the lighting places were, these old warehouse buildings are now prime real estate, either for condos or for fancy offices. All the designers are over, Kenneth Cole and the rest of them.
Costume Clash in
Chasing
Sound
Art.
City,
Right.
Rosebrand Sound City.
And
They're
Rosebrand
all-
used, and they all used to be in the neighborhood, right? Rosebrand was on 42nd Street or 40th or something, right? That's all fabric and draperies, all theatrical curtains and things like that. So where are we up to now? We're up to 2000, and we skipped to 2009 with the school.
Didn't mean to. But
No, I did.
Yeah.
I brought it up to that.
Did you
So-
want to go back to
What? To what?
just before moving here? 04, 05?
Well, I don't remember. What did we do in 04 and 05?
I think we were talking about that. I think at that point it was just trying to rent the theater out mostly.
No, we did in 05. In the fall of 04 we did.
Midsummer. We did Midsummer.
Was that in 04 in the spring? Yeah, I think it was in the spring of
It was in
04.
the spring.
And then we did Melissa Maxwell's play, Unrequited Love, in the spring. And in the fall, we did the New York, we actually might even have been U.S. premiere of an Argentinian playwright called The Visit. And it was really interesting. Ricardo Monti is the playwright, and he's very well known. This is the other thing, these incredible playwrights known around the world, except for in the United States, because they're not. But they're the theater, not of the absurd, but really more sort of theater of the grotesque. It's a fascinating script, and it was the first English language production of that play that was done in the United States. And we did a women's work production, was the very last thing we did in the fall of 2005.
When was Le Meringue? That was in the old space.
That was 04, yeah. Oh, yeah. So with Ted Lange, who was Isaac on The Love Boat,
Yeah.
for those who know who he was.
Yeah.
He wrote a play called Lemon Meringue Facade, and Meganne designed that, too. I don't think we did, but we didn't do any Shakespeare. We did A Midsummer Night's Dream, was the last
Right.
big Shakespeare
Big
production we
Shakespeare.
did. Because then in 2005, we actually did the Parks tour of Romeo and Juliet. We did a tour of city parks with Romeo and Juliet.
Wow.
And, yeah.
The Midsummer we had a lot of lead time on,
Yes.
which was wonderful because we did that all inspired India, and with a lot of saris and sari fabric, and the horse was like the Indian, the horse, the ass's head had all that sort of Indian inspired decoration on it, and because we had the lead time, I actually ordered the costumes from India
Wow.
so that we could afford them in bulk from India. I was like, okay, send me 20 assorted saris and or else we could never have afforded to do that show. Fortunately, we knew what we wanted to do with it
Yes.
early enough
Yeah.
that like 2 or 3 months in advance before rehearsals even started, so we could do that.
We did do the Shakespeare Made Simple. We had
Oh yeah, I mean we did that. We did all the
and
stuff because we actually
like
continued
that.
it into the
Right.
2006 when we moved here.
Right.
Our series Shakespeare Made Simple, leading ladies, fools, and villains, and then the Shakespeare Vaudeville that we would do for schools. And actually, 2004 was the first time we did the Shakespeare Vaudeville because I had been teaching at LIU then, and we created that. Danny Gonzalez, one of our company members, was my assistant director and choreographer, and she created the whole opening and closing sequence, which were set to Brush Up Your Shakespeare, Cole Porter's. So we did that with the kids at LIU, and then realized it was a great little set piece. It's an hour long. We did that in 2007. I mean, we did that into
We did that. Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, we did it out at LIU again with.
But I'm thinking that the shortened versions of R&J and
Oh yes, at the old space,
at the
right?
old
Yeah, we did
space.
75-minute versions and brought the schools to us there because we could, because
Yeah.
we could actually fit 100 kids in that studio
Yeah.
when we didn't have a set. Yes, and so the Fools, Leading Ladies, and Villains, we would have 100 kids, and we'd leave. There'd be like a postage stamp of playing space. But because it was all 4 corners were open, and because they were dealing with the kids, and there wasn't really a set, it didn't matter. And so that got us. Our Shakespeare Made Simple program got us our first funding from the Department of Cultural Affairs in 2000 and I want to say 2003, but I think it was earlier because it was along the time we were doing Shrew.
Right.
True
Yeah.
for the schools. We brought the
Yeah,
schools
yeah.
through as well.
And the program officer then at the time came and sat and watched Shakespeare's Leading Ladies. We had one school from Brooklyn that would come to every show we did, Fools, Leading Ladies and Villains, and the teacher, Mr. Golden, Kerry Golden, would bring his classes to everyone for years. And I asked him one time, I said, don't you ever get bored with this? So, like, you've seen these shows a million times. And he said, no, that he always loved watching his students interact with the actors in Discovered. And but the Department of Cultural Affairs program officer at the time said that we seem to have discovered the magic formula to making the language completely understandable, and to make the situation clear and all of that. So he was very impressed, right? Because he came to Macbeth at the church. So I think it was 2001 that we got the funding. But from that, and from dealing with kids, right? And that the whole design of that came from my, starting my theatrical career at the age of 8 in a professional children's theater company in my hometown in central New York. And so I went, okay, what did we do? Well, we always said there was always a chase scene through the kids as the audience, right? So dealing with the kids, that it was that was actually what we started New Perspectives with, by the way, going all the way back to my first thing, which is that we were founded in 91 and officially incorporated in 92, was that I had been asked if I could do some Shakespeare for the schools by an arts and ed, one of these places that books, they're like a booking agent. So I was like, I'm not going to direct a Shakespeare production, and I had also never directed a Shakespeare production in 1991, a whole production. I admit that now. On the off chance that some kids would want to come, like a school would want to come. So I came up with this idea of the Fools, Leading Ladies and Villains. And also, serendipitously, my entire working life outside of the theater in New York has been in some form of education. It was never my plan. So I had worked at Bank Street College of Education first in the admissions office. Then for 8 years, I was with an educational research firm. So I thought about, one of the major things in terms of affirmative action and also getting buy-in is to have people on stage that look like your audience. So with the public schools, to have the multiracial casting was critical, and also to not ignore them, to go in their little faces and sit in their laps and do all of that. And by picking Fools, Leading Ladies and Villains, they were archetypal characters that we could then create study guides and supplemental materials to go with it. So I was asked to do that and created that in 1991. In the fall of 91, I gathered some folks together and we did those performances, we did them for the schools, and that became the formula for all of New Perspectives work. So when we were incorporated in 92, that was really the foundation, was that we would never pretend the audience wasn't there. We would always have diverse casting, and that we want the educational component. So even for things for adults, you've seen where we do our playbills, there's always a director's note in our work that we've been now doing since about 2009, the whole 50/50 and 2020 parody for women theater artists, our On Her Shoulders reading series, that there's a scholarly dramaturgical essay in there, as well as a playwright's bio, in other stuff that we do, because we really want our audiences, young or old, to have a window into the thinking behind what we do. So what Meganne's description of how she came up with the costumes for the characters in Shrew is part of the process of, it's the whole message, it's the whole impact of right? So it's not like it just comes out of nowhere, right? That there's really a lot invested and a lot of thinking behind what it is that we're always trying to say, regardless of what the show is that we're doing, and whether it's a kid's show or whether it's a full-length Shakespeare production. So,
Which New Perspectives needs to do?
What?
Which New Perspectives needs to do?
We need to do what?
A full Shakespeare.
Oh yeah, we need the money. If we could find an affordable space, we could do it tomorrow. But
Space.
Space.
It all comes back to space.
Wow.
It does, and we started with
Started
this.
with space.
Yeah, we started
We're
with
still
space.
continuing with space.
Yeah. So, and now we're up to 2016.
We are.
And we've gone international now. So
That's right. You had a
Yes.
recent trip.
What?
You had a recent trip.
We did in March, and we went. I was there. We went in August with another play, and we would go again. But so one of the things that's really interesting, because I also started in addition to space, was the issue of our mission and how there isn't really a whole lot of people interested in supporting it financially, and trying to figure that out for years. A friend of the company in looking at our history that's all over our walls, really sort of summed it all up. And he said, the problem here is that the people New Perspectives are serving, are not in a position to financially support the company. And whether that is our artists or whether it is the audiences that we predominantly serve. And that's unlike other established off-Broadway companies or off-Broadway, where they have a subscriber base or they have people that they're serving, they have some named recognition, they've got some celebrities. So there's people that want to get involved either on their board or be big contributors because there's some, I don't know what the aspect of it is. It's a little more cachet to it. Now, our work is as good or better than 99% of what anybody else does out there, but we don't have a movie star doing it. And also, we don't have people coming along and directing something who have no business directing, a Shakespeare play, and or putting somebody because they're a name in a role that they're not really right for, or that doesn't suit the vision of what it is that we're trying to do with the work. And so I was actually really very depressed about all of this, because after doing 15 years at the Old Space, where we really were kind of on the cusp of being known. I mean, we were always known. We're very well known in the off-Broadway community. We're actually very well known in the theater community in New York. So that's the paradox of New Perspectives, is that everyone knows who we are. We have a great reputation for quality work. We're well known for our work in terms of developing plays by women and our diversity. And people say all the time how much they love us, but nobody will give us a substantial amount of money to really, sort of break through that barrier. And that's when I realized, what we say our mission is, people do admire the mission, but they don't want to fund it. So in 2014, I had the great fortune of meeting Patricia Ariza, who runs the Colombian Theater Corporation in Bogota, including the Teatro de la Candelaria, which just celebrated 50 years. And their mission is theater for social justice and political change. And they have been doing it under gunfire for a long, long time.
Yes, they have.
And that even
Literal gunfire.
literal
Yes.
gunfire.
Yes.
Patricia wore a bulletproof vest for a long time. And even now with the trade deal with the United States and the, quote, peace accords, there's still so much violence. But when I met her, I was she came to New York. I was part of an award that she was given. And so we were then invited, a couple of us, to go to Bogota in April of 2015 for the World Summit for Art and Culture for Peace in Colombia. And one of the things that Patricia always said is that if there's peace in Colombia, there will be peace in the entire Central and South American region, because it all flows from there.
Yeah.
And it was a serious eye-opener to go down there. And she has a small black box theater that is very reminiscent of our Old Space, although they have permanent seating on one side. And then the Candelaria, and these are Spanish colonial buildings, that are like 500-year-old buildings that they are doing theater. Yeah, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. But my faith in what we are doing, and not literally what we're doing day to day, but my faith in the reason why we're doing it, the purpose of what we do, was really restored. Mm-hmm. Because they have lost people, they've been gunned down, they've been, they've been threatened, they have lived hand to mouth, and they have really and truly changed the political dynamics in Bogota, somewhat in the larger country, because Patricia is on the team that is doing the peace negotiations in Cuba. She was invited to be on that. But bringing people in off the streets and creating theater with them, the prostitutes, the victims of the violence from all sides, coming in, letting them tell their stories, and working with professional actors and developing pieces. So I went in April, and then we were invited to do the Women on Stage for Peace Festival that she started 24 years ago in last August. And so we took a play, Jihad, which is now called Jihad the Play, so that there's no confusion about what we're talking about, by Anne Chamberlain, and it is a fictional meeting between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin in the Third Crusade, and it won another Off-Broadway Review Award, which we did that play 20 years ago, and so dusting that off to take it to Bogota, it was exciting and yet really depressing that it was still so even more relevant now than it was when we did it 20 years ago. So we did it there, and now we're trying to do that as an off-Broadway production, which we have never, ever, ever done before. So we have a producing consultant. So anyone who wants to give us money, know more about that, they can contact us. And then we were invited to go back in just March. We did a retrospective of short plays from our Women's Short Play Lab, and 2 of those plays we took down there. And that is it's kind of like the Fringe. It's only every other year. But it was Patricia created it in opposition to the Ibero-American Theater Festival, which is apparently the largest theater festival in the world.
Yeah, it is.
I was at that.
And it happens every 2 years. And the criticism is that it's very commercial, it's very spectacle oriented, and it's very expensive. And we actually heard this from a number of people that when we were down there in March, that they could get 6 tickets to the alternative festival for each ticket they could buy at the Ibero-American Theater Festival.
Yeah.
So we did two of the short plays that we have done here, and it was wildly successful. One was in English with super titles, and the other was a Spanish writer, and we had cast Latina actresses to do it here, and so we were just able to translate that. We were sold out. There were people sitting on the floor. It was really, really amazing. And then I was asked to participate in a panel the next morning on theater and violence, and you know how violence either how you talk about it through theater, or what the impact of it is on, or how you use violence in theater. So it was really very, very gratifying. And so this is my sister says that's my retirement destination all the time. If someone said hi to me on the street, who I had no idea who they were, and I went, I'm famous in Bogota at least, if not in New York. So.
And that brings us to 2016.
It does.
And our 25th year.
Yep. June 20th.
June 20th.
And it's O'Looney's is the bar restaurant. It's on 50th Street between 8th and Broadway. And 6:30 to 9:30, we have a whole back area to ourselves. There's no cover charge. We have happy hour drink prices for the cash bar. And we're going to have lots of fun and games with New Perspectives trivia and some door prizes and raffle prizes, and we just really, really want to have a good time and have as many people who've come through the doors of New Perspectives, which by now is in the thousands, of actors, writers, directors, designers, audience, thousands and thousands. I mean, if we count audience, if we count all the work we did in the schools, and we used to do an outdoor Shakespeare fair at Riverbank State Park, remember? And that, I mean, thousands. We would have to say 40 or 50,000 people have had experienced a New Perspectives production in some fashion in 25 years. So we want as many of them to crowd into O'Looney's as can possibly fit.
And where can they go for more information about that?
To our website, www.nptnyc.org. Or they can call, or they can stop by. That's the beauty of having a storefront now, is that the neighbors can just drop in.
That's very true. And you're open. What are your open office
We're usually
hours?
here between 11 and 6. Now, we might be here earlier and we might be here later, but in terms of sort of office hours, it's usually 11 to 6, Monday through Friday.
And we're also doing, in a couple of weeks, a new thing with the puppet shows. Did you talk about the puppet shows at all?
No, that'll be for the next one. Remember, we did say we have to have more than one session for the New Perspectives history.
But in a couple of weeks, you're doing a family.
Yeah, the Bad Birthday, June 4th and June 11th. 2 performances each day. Those are Saturdays at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And that includes family time, so your kids get to see the show, and then they get to make a sock puppet and act it and go behind the puppet theater and get tips from the actors and take their sock puppet home with them.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
And interactive.
And interactive and educational.
And educational.
Because it comes with a study guide.
Yes, it does.
Yes, the parents can take a study guide home.
That's great. And I think we've covered all we can for today.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Melody, Ray, and Meganne for, recapping the history of New Perspectives Theater Company and
Thank you, Federico,
Thank you
for
for,
having us.
yes,
Yes.
for having us.
And
For
we're-
being our host.
Thank you. It's my first time. I'm glad I shared my first time with all three of
Yes. With the family, as it were.
you. Yeah.
Incest is best.
That is not a way to end the show.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it.
I think it's.
Sounds like Game of Thrones.
It's a very popular show. And
Okay.
thank you and good night.
Good night.